1,000 years after Rome fell, Byzantium still stood behind triple walls and secret weapons. The Ottomans turned conquered rivals into elite soldiers. Imperial China's exams chose peasants for positions of power. It is no accident these empires shattered the average lifespan of 250 years. Each mastered survival in ways most kingdoms never even imagined. But what was their real secret, and could it work again? In 529 CE, Emperor Justinian began a project that would outlive his own reign by centuries. The Corpus Juris Civilis, completed in 534, gathered the scattered laws and legal opinions of Rome into a single unified code. This was more than a legal handbook. It was the foundation for an empire's survival. By turning custom into written rule, Justinian's code made government predictable, even as rulers changed and crises came and went. Legal historian consensus calls it a backbone for European law, but in Byzantium it shaped daily life. Contracts, inheritance, property disputes, and even the rules for imperial succession all drew from the code's logic. The real genius lay in how law fed bureaucracy. With clear rules for taxes and property, Byzantine officials could track land holdings, assess revenues, and enforce payment across provinces. Tax registers known as practica recorded obligations down to the village, while officials called commerciarioi monitored customs and trade. This administrative web meant money kept flowing to the treasury, even as borders shifted or emperors fell. At its height, land taxes made up nearly 80% of state income, funding armies and fortifications that protected the capital for generations. Justinian's system didn't just keep the lights on. It created a fiscal engine that outlasted civil wars and foreign invasions. The rules that governed tax and property gave the empire a kind of institutional memory, allowing new leaders to step in without starting from scratch. In Byzantium, written law and a disciplined bureaucracy proved more durable than any single ruler or general, setting a standard for statecraft that echoed through the centuries. When Heraclius took the throne in 610, the empire was battered by invasions and shrinking fast. Instead of relying on distant mercenaries or a single standing army, he made a radical change. By the mid-7th century, soldiers were given farmland in military districts called themes. These soldier farmers worked their own plots and defended their own frontiers, tying survival to the land and the sword. The theme system did not just save money, it created a local force ready to mobilize against sudden threats, even as the empire lost half its territory after the Arab conquests. Chronicles from the time describe morale shifting as entire families became both farmers and defenders, turning border provinces into lines of resilience. Defense was more than boots on the ground. Constantinople's triple walls, first built in the 5th century, stood as a physical barrier that would hold off dozens of sieges for almost 1,000 years. But stone alone was not enough. In the 7th century, Byzantine engineers developed Greek fire, a naval weapon that could burn even on water. Deployed for the first time around 672, it turned enemy fleets into infernos, buying time and space for the battered empire. Arab chroniclers wrote of ships consumed in flames, unable to escape the sticky, blazing liquid. Survival also meant knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. Byzantine diplomats paid tribute to powerful neighbors, brokered alliances, and used marriage as a tool to buy peace. These moves kept the empire breathing while it rebuilt its strength. Heraclius's reforms, technological edge, and diplomatic maneuvers blended into a system where adaptability became the rule, not the exception. This fusion of local defense, innovation, and deal-making helped Byzantium hold the line long after other states vanished. On the morning of May 29, 1453, thunder shook the earth outside Constantinople. Mehmed II's new weapon, a giant bronze cannon cast by the Hungarian engineer Orban, sent a stone ball crashing into the city's ancient walls. The barrel stretched nearly 8 meters, loaded with projectiles weighing close to half a ton. For 53 days, the bombardment continued until a breach finally opened. Behind this display of firepower was a different kind of engine, the Ottoman Timar system, a network that turned land into loyalty and revenue into cavalry. Timar grants reached their peak around 1500, with tens of thousands of cavalrymen, known as sipahis, holding rights to farmland across Anatolia and the Balkans. Each Timar was more than a reward, it was a contract. In return for the right to collect taxes from their allotted land, sipahis pledged military service to the Sultan. These records, kept in detailed registers called defters, track land yields, obligations, and the men who would ride to war when summoned. Unlike feudal lords in Europe, sipahis owed their status entirely to the central state, not to birth or local inheritance. On the battlefield, this system meant the Ottomans could field a cavalry force that was both loyal and well supplied, ready to move at the Sultan's command. The fusion of fiscal policy and military organization gave the empire a backbone as solid as any wall, funding armies and binding elites to the fate of the state. The cannon may have shattered stone, but it was the Timar system that held the empire together, generation after generation. Across the Ottoman heartlands, boys between the ages of 8 and 18 were chosen for a path that would reshape their lives and the empire's future. This system, called devshirme, first appears in records in the late 14th century. Recruiters gathered Christian youths from Balkan villages and brought them to Istanbul. There they entered palace schools, learned Turkish and Islam, and faced years of rigorous training. Some would become janissaries, elite infantry who owed their loyalty directly to the Sultan, not to birth or clan. Others rose even higher, like Pargali Ibrahim Pasha, a Greek-born recruit who became Grand Vizier under Suleiman the Magnificent. For every story of ascent, Ottoman records also mention escapes and resistance, stories that echo in Balkan folklore as both trauma and legend. But the empire's stamina rested on more than just military talent. The Ottomans ruled over Greeks, Armenians, Jews, and countless other groups. Instead of forcing uniformity, they crafted a system of communal autonomy known as the millet. Beginning in the 15th century, each millet, whether Orthodox Christian, Jewish, or Armenian, governed its own schools, courts, and religious affairs under charters granted by the Sultan. Community leaders mediated disputes and collected taxes, reporting upward while managing daily life in their own tongue and tradition. This arrangement let the empire absorb difference without fracturing, binding loyalty through negotiated autonomy rather than brute force. In the Ottoman world, pluralism was not just tolerated, it became a source of resilience, allowing the state to draw strength from the diversity of its subjects. Visual suggestions. Map of the Balkans and Anatolia showing recruitment routes. Timeline graphic showing the late 14th century through the 16th century. Illustrations of palace schools and janissary training. Portraits of Pargali Ibrahim Pasha and Suleiman the Magnificent. Motion graphics cue. Animated layers labeled as millets, each showing local institutions sliding into a unified imperial map, and a simple caption explaining negotiated autonomy. In 221 BCE, the Qin dynasty set the stage for a new kind of empire by imposing a single script, standardized weights, and a uniform legal code across China. This drive for uniformity made it possible to govern vast territories through a single bureaucratic system, a model that would outlast the Qin and become a template for centuries. Later dynasties refined this system with the Keiju, the imperial examination, first formalized under the Sui and Tang, and reaching its height during the Song. Each year, hundreds of thousands of candidates competed for a handful of posts, their essays judged anonymously to curb favoritism. Success was rare, but even a local pass could lift a family for generations. Scholar officials like Wang Anshi, who rose through these exams in the 11th century, became architects of reform, pushing for state monopolies and new fiscal policies. The Song dynasty's embrace of paper money in the year 1024 fueled a commercial boom, making it the first government in history to circulate banknotes. Gunpowder, too, was turned from curiosity to battlefield tool, giving armies a new edge. In China, merit and market scale worked hand in hand. Bureaucrats managed taxes and trade, while innovation kept the state resilient, even as dynasties changed above them. Across 3 continents and 2 millennia, the average empire lasted about 250 years. Yet Byzantium, the Ottomans, and Imperial China each beat the odds, surviving 3 to 10 times longer than the norm. Their stories fit what statisticians call a log-normal curve. Most empires fade fast, but a few outliers endure, thanks to a blend of 5 core factors. Governance set the baseline. Written codes like Justinian's law and China's exam system created rules that could outlast any single dynasty or sultan. Adaptability kept those systems alive, whether through military reforms, new technologies, or the ability to absorb outsiders. Military innovation mattered, but only when paired with institutions that could supply, train, and pay armies over centuries. Economic systems such as land taxes, paper money, or timur grants turned resources into state power. Finally, cultural cohesion, from Confucian rites to religious pluralism, gave legitimacy that could outlast even civil wars. Empires that managed all 5, governance, adaptability, military innovation, economic strength, and cultural glue, proved most likely to defy history's short average and survive the centuries. Empires endure when their institutions adapt faster than threats evolve. Today, as global systems face unprecedented challenges, the lesson is clear. Rigidity invites collapse, and resilience sustains. In a world where nothing lasts forever, the true secret of survival is learning to change before you must. What do you think endures?